Welcome back to the Momentous Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Israel. Thank you for tuning in again for this week's episode. Today's guest has one of the more diverse and compelling journeys that we've had here on the podcast so far. And that guest is Dr. Tom Zheng, who started his career in physical therapy and exercise therapy, became a clinical director, transitioned into elite sports performance as a sports scientist with the San Francisco 49ers. Then went on to found multiple companies, most notably the Players Company, which is an athlete-built and athlete-owned platform focused on education community and private investment access. But he's also the founder of Tomco Holdings, which is a holding company, private investment platform, and firm focused on sports ownership at the intersection, like Momentous, of commercial real estate and strategic assets. And so I'm very much excited about talking about that as a thesis and the trends that he's seeing from his seat in the space. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome back to the Momentous Sports Podcast. Today we are joined by somebody who I have been really excited about talking to since I met recently and learned about their incredible journey, very eclectic, unique journey from where they started professionally to where they are today. And I think it's always fascinating to kind of look into the backgrounds of people doing amazing things in the asset class of sports. So first and foremost, Tom, thanks for joining us early on the West Coast as we're wrapping up the day here in Berlin.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm excited to be on, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm going to, because of your journey being so unique, I'm actually going to read it here from my notes, but I'd love to hear kind of that journey in your words and anything that you'd like to add about it. But you started in physical therapy, exercise therapy, became a clinical director for a period of time, moved into elite sports performance and sports science with the 49ers, then went on to found multiple other companies, including the Players Company that you currently serve as CEO for, and we'll dive into that here later. And ultimately have built a private investment platform in Tomco, really focused on the intersection of professional team ownership and mixed-use real estate development, very much in line with the work that we do at Momentous. But in your own words, like, how did that journey come to fruition? Was there a grand plan behind it? Parlaying sports performance into institutional private equity ultimately, and what you're doing with TPC is a fascinating journey. So how did that unfold? How did that happen? I'm sure our audience would love to know more about that.
Absolutely. I could start way back, but very brief scope. No, that was totally not the plan at all. It just kind of like happened that way, which I'm very grateful for. I've been alluded a lot of great
Sure.
opportunities. But yeah, I've always loved sports. I played basketball and ran track in my younger days in high school and college and all that. But when I got to college, I'm like 5'5", right? I realized, yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to play college ball, right? But I wanted to stay around sports, so I got very heavy into physical therapy, exercise science, and sports physiology, and all of those different things as a way to kind of stay with it. My parents are immigrants from China, so they've always been into me. Hey, you got to be a doctor, right?
Sure.
So, of
Sure.
course, that's kind of the route I went. Got a PhD and a couple of masters and a couple of other degrees. Ended up working in a couple of great sports medicine clinics, one of which hosted John Lynch, the current general manager for the 49ers. That's how I got kind of my route into the Niners. I
Got
moved
it.
up there in 2018. I think we stayed until 2022 when my daughter, she's right here, my little
Awesome.
girl. We left after her first birthday just because the schedule was just brutal, right? It was the same thing
Yeah.
for staff as it is for athletes. But it was a really great experience, phenomenal ownership there, good staffing, and really good players. But we did pinpoint a couple of different things while I was in the locker room, particularly on the players' side, and that's what led to the journey of starting the players' company with Sherm and Sheldon, right?
Yeah.
So especially at the time, it was probably 20, maybe 21. Yeah, 2020 or 2021. especially when COVID kind of like started ramping, right? There was a
Mhm.
lot of uncertainty, and unfortunately, I don't know if you know this or not, but in football, there's not a lot of guaranteed contracts. It's getting a lot better now. But
Yeah.
at the time, like most of the roster basically played on mostly unguaranteed contracts, especially if you're at the bottom, 50-ish% of the roster where you don't have a multi-year deal. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, for a lot of young guys, we saw Sherman show where they're older guys at that point. Sherman made a lot of money on his venture side of things, like with body armor, for example.
Sure.
A lot of guys didn't delve into the private market, right? They had CFAs, of course, but if you're a guy on a minimum, unguaranteed, you can't really even afford a CFA, right?
Yeah.
So we saw a
Hmm.
lot of those kids unfortunately go into really bad journeys. One kid in particular wasn't able to make child support. Down the road, he got I think it was a rookie contract, undrafted. He made it all the way through camp. He made it to the main roster. He thought he was going to make, I think, like 700K, but they cut him week one, right? So he walked away with a 10K signing bonus, unvested with the league. So he didn't get any of the benefits. So we started the
Yeah.
Players Company as a way for players ourselves to help athletes, particularly NFL, find a pathway to wealth outside of sport. And it's really geared towards the bottom 80%, those guys who may not have the know how or the resources to build an actual team around them.
Got it. Really, really cool kind of parlay of that. I'm curious. In first of all, just you kind of went right through it, but you meet John Lynch, you end up connecting with him, and then starting to work with the 49ers. When you landed inside the organization, like what was your core focus? What was your role? I know from my startup journey and experience in the neuroscience space that the 49ers generally from a venture perspective, from an innovation perspective, are really leading that and think about that a lot. They were always kind of for a startup, like how do we get in front of the 49ers venture arm, right? Especially in the space that we were in. But generally, when you landed in there, was it in the athletic training room where full contact sport with athletes on a day-to-day basis? I've been in a few myself. It's a wild environment, and to your point, yes, you live and work the same schedule, if not more, than the athlete. So, what did that kind of look like when you showed up, and then maybe how did it progress in your time there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, man. That brings me back a good bit. So it was a very interesting, and I was very lucky to be able to have the role I had. It was more on the sports scientist side before that was an actual kind of a profession, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
the NCSA or the CSCS, whatever, the Strength and Conditioning Association,
Mm-hmm.
literally came out with a certification for it as I left the
Got
49ers.
it.
So that's how
Got
kind
it.
of funny it was, right? But
Right.
really, I served in between the weight room, traditional strength and conditioning, and the athletic training room, so traditional medical, right? So let's say a guy just destroys his ankle, right? We'll just say grade 2.5 ankle sprain, can't walk on it, about 70% tear in the ligamentous tissue. He would go and spend probably the first week and a half with the athletic trainers. They'll do all of the kind of like ultrasound, de-inflammation work. My chief job was basically to figure out muscle patterning and ulterior alternative modalities to enhance recovery, healing, and to limit re-injury risk. Right. So when you
Got
hurt
it.
an ankle, right, you kind of walk uneven, right? That
Yep.
causes a lot of strain, particularly on things like your patella tendon, your hip capsule, even your spine, because now it's not a stable base. So that's why you see a lot of guys that tear an ACL. Usually, about 80% of the second tear is on the other ACL because of overloading. So my job was to take the guy through basically whatever we needed to just continue his return to play protocol, as well as ensure that mechanically he was moving all right, so that he wasn't at a significant disadvantage for re-injury.
Got it. I have to ask, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, if you have any theories, but obviously there's been a lot lately about injuries with the 49ers and the substation that is near the stadium. Is there anything there? Is it interesting to at least think about? And is it something that, you will think about in the future when you're designing live, work, play, sports, mixed use environments and kind of what factors could affect performance that maybe most would overlook?
All right, so there's a lot of hoo-ha. I'll tell you that. There's a lot of pub around it. I would say it's about 50% correct, right? And it just so happens I actually have a pulse electromagnetic device on me right now. It
Hmm.
stimulates circulation and basically a little bit of healing factors, especially if you have inflammation in certain areas. I ate a lot of food yesterday. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
A little
But
bloated today.
yes, a little bit, a little bit. We went out with my wife and my daughter and just had like a nice dinner out last night. And unfortunately, I
Love
ate
that.
like an 18-ounce steak.
Mm. At 5'5", that's a lot of steak.
Right, right.
Good.
But yes, I would say the substation there may have an effect, but I don't think it's a predominant factor, if that makes sense.
Got it. It
So
does.
it does what's the word, influences a little bit of cellular activity anytime you have low grade electromagnetism, right? Because that's how your cells
Hmm.
communicate. So in terms of the connective tissue and the soft tissue injury risk, I can see it having kind of like a minor correlation, but nothing substantial enough to say, oh yeah, no, that's the exact cause, right?
Got it. Yeah.
That might
Yeah.
be one of many. It might be like a
Got it.
5% change in the little pendulum of a standard deviation. But with that being said, I worked in that facility literally 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
quite familiar. I charged my electric car right next to that substation. Uh, so I'm
Interesting.
familiar.
It'll be an interesting story to follow for sure. I'd like to, my personal journey that's taken me through the startup world. A lot of time I had this innate desire to support, think about more, provide resources for the athlete journey, especially in the transitional stage. It sounds like the players company and kind of the origination of the organization was similar in a sense. You were seeing kind of the financial challenges, but we all recognize that there's multiple identity crises, et cetera, based on who somebody is. So maybe could you go into a little bit deeper about the Players Company, what it's doing and what it's trying to provide as a service? Is it more networking? Is there a differentiation between some of the other networking or communities that are athlete focused, similar to PAC or the like? Like, why don't you break down TPC for us and kind of the journey you guys are on and the mission you're on?
100%. So I can tell you about the origins a little bit, and that might give some insight
Yeah,
into the value portion of it. So
sure.
when we started the Players Company, it was really we didn't there wasn't like a definite plan, right? We didn't go, okay, here's a 5-year business model, here's how we're going to monetize, here are the verticals we're going to attack. No, it was really just how do we solve this problem, right? Which I think a lot of entrepreneurs like yourself usually kind of like that's the spark.
Okay.
So we started it as a way for athletes to connect with high end or tier one venture capital firms, family offices, as well as successful tech CEOs, since we were in Silicon Valley, right? Those are a
Right.
plethora like General Catalyst, CrossCourt Ventures, AZ16 had a presence, SVB has presence. So we kind of started it as a way for us to just match people that wanted to learn more, right? If you wanted to invest in a fund, here's a really good guy that we know. Here, go talk to him. If you want
Yeah.
to learn about starting a business, okay, well, here's the guy that freaking started like all these tech companies. So we started it as a networking company with no real monetization. That's what really gave us kind of the good branding, the trust, and the good faith in the athlete community because we weren't looking to monetize, and we're still really not. Right?
Right.
Functionally today, our revenue streams predominantly come from sponsorships. With the rest of it, we are rolling and building out a tech platform to
Got it.
better produce kind of what we want to for our demographic. But really, we've never like charged a fee or anything like that.
Got it. Got it.
But as the Players Company sits today, we are think of it like a toolbox really for athletes for connectivity, right? Like if you are happen to be in the Kansas City area and you want to connect with the Hunts, for example, right? Like
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
happy to make those introductions. We're happy to help you facilitate cross sport connection. right? Like if you're
Sure.
an NBA guy, you want to talk to some NFL people. So that's one part of the business that's probably never going to change. The
Sure.
other couple of aspects is we wanted to move into a way where we could provide tools as well as kind of like real hand knowledge for our demo base. So that's why we do a lot of our events that fluctuate and centrate around athletepreneurship. So starting a business using your platform as an athlete. We usually have some great retired guys, active guys speak on panels, a lot of great family offices, and a lot of good like financial experts like your JP Morgan, for example.
Sure. Sure.
Uh, those are, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was curious as I hear that. Obviously, oh, let me ask this question quickly because we do have quite a few in our audience who are or funds or firms with various mandates, various level of interest, outraising capital. Think about the athlete investor as kind of a unique, diversified archetype of participant for a number of reasons. Although it should always, be done the right way, but how can an organization looking to add value to the ecosystem, education to the ecosystem, but also figure out what the right type of partnership is? Is that kind of ad hoc on a kind of one by one basis based on a relationship, or how can they reach out and get involved?
Absolutely. So you could go to theplayerscompany.co. There's a partner with us bucket there.
Okay.
If you fill that out, that goes straight to a couple of our admins. Or you could reach out to me directly on LinkedIn if there's a good
Okay.
fit proposal. Because another vehicle that we've built is basically an investment arm for the athletes, right? Because you have to empower and then provide essentially a tangible, actionable item, right?
Right.
So we've luckily made a lot of great investments all on the venture side thus far. In the last few years, had a couple of exits, which has been great, in some key companies. Um, but I
Huge.
would say if you're looking to work with us, we'd love to have the conversation. There's never a shortage of people looking to diversify for the most part. And I would say, as a piece of advice, it's usually geographic based, right? Like if you happen to
Sure.
be like a Kansas City centrated fund, right? Because a
Right.
lot of athletes, they don't want to just put their money in, they want to like meet and see who they're working with, right?
Sure.
So we're
Sure.
happy to kind of facilitate that for the right amount of individuals.
Awesome. Thanks for that. What do you think? I guess what have you learned? I've had a number of athletes on the podcast, and I'm always asking how they've thought about their investment philosophy, whether that started in the locker room. Was that something that they started to think more about towards the end of their career, or then once they retired? Did they feel in a good position and know what they were doing? I guess generally, what have you learned about what's needed from an educational perspective for athletes? So, it's very interesting. Some of the most, really that top 20%, let's go all the way up to the one, like some of these contracts are turning athletes into family offices essentially once they sign the contract, right? And there can be infrastructure around you to really help facilitate basically everything that you're doing from a business perspective. But to your point, there's an 80% that may not have that infrastructure built in and have to think differently about how they're allocating the capital that they do have. Um, have you learned that there is a significant amount of education that needs to be placed? Or guys starting to get more astute over time? Do you see it being more of a focus with athletes today? Obviously, there's a personal branding perspective, right? And the monetization of that. But anything that comes to the surface or that is salient related to how you've seen the evolution of the athlete thinking about investment, I'm sure our audience would be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, 100%. I think over even the last 5 years, as you mentioned, like contracts have skyrocketed. Unfortunately, most minimums stay the same.
Sure.
But average contract value definitely has gone up substantially with these new TV deals, new CBAs. I would say as a demographic, what I've noticed is every different sport has a different type of archetype of athlete investor, if that makes sense. Like an
Sure.
NBA athlete is a lot more amiable to kind of invest in early stage venture compared to an NFL
Mhm.
guy. I think a lot of it has to do with disposable income, of course. But the first thing we always do is whoever we work with, if you're at an event, you meet with us, you meet with a couple of our partners. We always say, just if you're going to go into the private market, just make sure you at least have a runway. because
Yeah.
careers end relatively quick and suddenly, like with an injury, for example. So as long as you're secure and you understand where you are in a financial position, please feel free. But I would say a lot of NFL players now are getting into venture capital, and an interesting segue, a lot of retired professionals as well as different sports athletes are getting into professional team ownership. I think you see a huge boom with it, like even with
Yeah.
Kevin Durant recently. I mean, not recently.
Yeah.
Last year, investing in a couple of different things. Josie Altidore joining the ownership of the Bills, right? I
Yep.
think
Yep.
that's the dream for any athlete that I've talked to, right? At the end of the day, you
Right.
don't want to own a tech company, you want to own a freaking team because you've been playing your whole life, right?
Right. Right.
So I think that's going to be a very interesting asset class, particularly in the next 10 years. Because as the streaming aspect goes, live entertainment is going to just become incrementally more valuable.
Totally, totally agreed. We're obviously thinking through a similar lens here at Momentous and where our investment focus is as a platform. And I will segue kind of into Tomco and want to explore more about how you've been thinking about professional sports investment. I learned pretty quickly from you about your infrastructure focus. And I'm sure most people recognize this, but there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, a lot of NDAs and other things. So feel comfortable to talk about whatever you can. But really, what was the impetus behind founding Tomco, getting the private equity, bringing in external capital that wasn't specifically related to TPC, but really generated through you and your relationships. What is Tomco today, and how are you thinking about personally and with your partners participating in that professional sports team ownership and like us, that mixed use real estate development?
Absolutely. That's a great segue, by the way.
You set it up. You set it up.
We worked as a team. I would say it's something I really fell into, right? Like a portion of my PhD is organizational leadership, which allotted me a
Mhm.
lot of good insight and experiences forming things for the
Sure.
most part. Because I had worked a lot like yourself, started, exited businesses prior to Players Company or during Players Company as well. I've built a interesting allotment of networks, right? Which I think
Yeah.
is where everybody kind of starts of ultra high net worth individuals, family offices, and because of my sports background as well as my connectivity to the athletes, a lot of athletes and a lot of team owners. My dad actually started a construction company when he came to America. Right,
Really.
very random. I didn't think I was ever going to get into real estate, but I mean, look at where we are now. So it started with the project. I believe the first one was it was a MBA, private equity exchange, and then it segued into MLS for the development side. But I really kind of
Yeah.
fell into it when the opportunities arose. Um, Tomco, as it sits today, is more of a development firm on the real estate side, as well as a partner in a lot of different. I guess it's a holding company, to say the least,
Sure. Sure.
right? What we try to really focus on is diversity in sports ownership. So what we
Okay.
try to do is build kind of a new formula around it, right? Where we
Yeah.
have a central anchor and we build around it entertainers, athletes, and kind of like adjacent offices on the team asset
Mhm.
side, which I think is a good segue from traditional ownership, right? As opposed to just one
Yeah.
singular, extremely wealthy individual.
Sure.
Um, on the real estate side, we found a good formula that is very lucrative for development. Anytime you have a new build of a stadium, usually within 5 years, the land value 2 to 4 X's. So
Mhm.
regardless of what you really build, right, you're gonna make your money
Yep.
back. And what we found is if you surround it with kind of like mixed use planning, your hospitality, your 1B attraction, so similar to what they did in Nashville as an entertainment district, right? You
Sure.
create a destination more than anything else, which is really cool. It uplifts the economy and it generates a lot of revenue, and it falls into the realm of legacy project.
Yeah, absolutely. Legacy, significant amount of potential community impact. We think about that a lot. Really, the chance to be an incredible steward of this living, breathing organism within a community. Um, and there are, for us, there were a lot of people out there as we started looking deeper into the space 3 years ago. We saw that, there were plenty of private equity groups, a limited number due to regulation, moving into the big five leagues, right? And, that was a path as a family office to think about and consider. Do we go participate as a minority? It's almost like an annuity, sitting up there in the professional leagues, or do we participate elsewhere, like the middle market of sports, where there's a lot of growth, stadium sizes of 5,000 to 15,000, typically in premium secondary markets where you've got a good private public relationship and they understand the value of the live, work, play environment. And ultimately, when you pair those together, and statistics show this, that there's enhanced valuation both in the sports entity, but also in the mixed use development and the various components within it when it has that um, adjacency. So, is this something that is thematic for you all? Are you taking opportunities and big swings when they present themselves, or are you looking in a specific, for us, the core focus is the middle market of sport. Like, where are you guys focusing? What's kind of salient to you, and how you're thinking about it?
That's a great question. The public-private partnership side weighs in it heavily because anytime you're able to get TIFs, anytime you're able to get bonds, that makes the capitalization of the project significantly easier, particularly on the cap stack side of things, right? But what we really look for is, yeah, I would agree, probably like middle market or even large market opportunities where we're able to either create a media asset around it or move a media asset into that market. So that's usually the predominant number one factor, right? Because we wouldn't be able to go in there just to build something, assuming and hoping people are going to come, right? It needs
Sure.
to have a large media tailwind. The other thing is basically economic impact that weighs very heavily, right? If we're able to uplift an economy and create kind of new jobs and all those things within an economy, I think just from a good feeling standpoint, that's a huge weighing factor, and especially the
Sure.
partners. So that's the biggest thing we also look for outside of the lucrative nature of whatever the project is who else is involved. Because with these
Right.
projects, Kyle, it takes 5 to 7 years to
Yeah.
stabilization. You're going to be in it for the long haul. You better really like who you're working with.
No doubt, no doubt, and you have to have the right type of capital, right? I know
Yeah.
that you have some incredible relationships, and often, when those are family office style relationships, they have a longer time horizon naturally that they can, be patient with. And to your point, that's what's often required here. And there are unique dynamics with the team or the operating component, as we call it, and various exit theses along the way, that I think make it significantly interesting. Outside of infrastructure, I know real estate development, we pound this to the ground in all of our content, and we're excited about it, which is why we do. But I'm curious, from just your seat, you're very connected to the venture community, you're seeing opportunities. Where are other trends within other asset classes that are salient to you, that athletes are thinking about more? There was the M&A market turned on last year, so there's been a lot more activity. Capital starting to get unlocked. What's salient right now? What's Tom thinking about in addition to the core focus of the real estate and the sports ownership?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe not on the venture side of things, but I think the IPO market is probably going to
Hmm.
reset pretty soon. It's been
Yeah.
in a very poor spot the last few years. But from my understanding, there's a couple of marquee companies probably listing and going public this year, which I think is going to cause a huge reset.
Sure.
But as it relates to venture capital, I would say there's a minor reset there in terms of capital being unlocked. I think the last maybe 4 years, 3 years or so, it's been very stringent, particularly for first time founders, in terms of just getting capital. But
Yeah.
I'd say tech bubble, it's kind of played out a good amount. Like there's been a huge boom in tech investments. Like we've made a couple, right, in the
Yeah.
last few years. I would be very curious to see how AI turns more from what it is now to potentially what generative AI could be, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but I would
Hmm.
say as it moves forward, I'm actually focused a little bit more on the private equity side.
Sure.
I've been through
Sure.
the venture racket.
Have you, what's the, I'm curious of what the deal flow looks like. And so in my seed, I've seen an incredible amount of opportunities over the last 2 or 3 years globally, whether that's European soccer and basketball with the NBA making an announcement that they're going overseas. How does that play into the arena infrastructure development here in Europe? There's obviously in the middle market a lot of emerging leagues. The USL is making a lot of noise with some of the restructuring of their framework as a league. Are there any areas like what is the deal flow like for you? Do you feel like there's a ton of opportunity out there right now? How are you staying patient and poised and focused on what your core thesis is when you see, man, there's a lot of what could be unique opportunities all around. Is it, I'm going to identify an incredible project, I'm going to ensure that these things are in place, and then I'm going to go execute and stay away from distraction. I'm always curious about the human side of these shiny objects that come across the desk all the time.
I would 100% concur with you. There's so much deal flow out there, and I think there's, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the amount of emerging leagues popping up in the last two
Incredible.
years is astronomical. I've
Yeah. Yeah.
but to your point, right? It's an interesting market. I think there's a change. I think a lot of these leagues are poised to fail. Unfortunately, there's always going to be
Mhm.
one centrated winner, right? Kind of think how the NBA became the NBA, right? A lot of competition early on, mergers and acquisition until there was one final one that was like the big dog, right?
Right.
But
Right.
when I look at the European market, I'll be honest, I am not the most knowledgeable on it. I
Sure.
know there's been a lot of movement, particularly of expansion, like American football in Europe, for example, that we've looked at
Yep.
a good amount. Something like that we like because we know there's an audience for it. We know there's a need, particularly on the athlete side of it, because you have thousands of kids graduating college, but how many kids get drafted? 256, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
57, maybe 57. So we know there's going to be an offshoot of a talent pool, something similar to what the NBA doing with the G League. That could be a feasible
Mhm.
option. I wouldn't expect anything like the NFL, for example, to pop up
No.
as a major league anytime soon. But I do think there's a good pathway for a lot of these developmental leagues. What we really focus on is the long term viability of it and the leadership around it. If it
Hmm.
doesn't have a good
Yep.
leader, a good seasoned leader, if it's about the what's a good word? I always say it's if it's about the pub, you're gonna fail.
Hmm. Interesting. Good quote there to be able to clip later on. I tend to agree with that. I've been in American football in Europe since 2009 as a player originally. It was super nascent back then, to say the least. I was over here in Dresden, Germany. I got off a plane and was like, what in the world? I could barely look up anything about it on Google. But I ultimately kind of took an entrepreneurial trip to Moscow, Russia in 2014 with the impetus being founding a American Football League there, having two teams
Oh,
traveling to the seven largest cities around Moscow like a traveling circus, housing both of those teams in the same apartment complex. So doing like a real world style documentary of all these guys landing and
mhm.
living in Russia for the first time, and then more of a hard knock style on the actual football component. But at the base of it, and in my mind, it was there's a bunch of guys that need to go play somewhere. We don't need to pay $500,000 contracts, but can we get guys over here for 5 months out of the year, paying 50 grand, 60 grand? have a little change in their pocket when they go home because we've paid for their expenses as well, and figure out how to continue to grow that. I ended up having to flee the country based on some just crazy Russian stuff that happened. You can Google that sometime. But that's always been top of mind for me, and I have seen kind of the emergence of it here again recently in Europe in a meaningful way. There's some fragmentation right now that's taking place that I think, to your point about which league ends up actually coming to the top, I think they're in that cycle over here at the moment. And then there was $100 million investment into the Mexican league. Christian McCaffrey, who was a part of that, which is also an interesting thesis. So I'm right there with you. I'm trying to stay very close to the table to understand. It's almost an underwriting diligence process for me. But the emerging leagues, I wrote in a newsletter this week about the barbell effect. Tons of capital moving into the big leagues, the championship, the premier, the big five in the US, a lot moving into this kind of early stage emerging space. And then there's kind of this in the middle, and that's why we've kind of focused in that middle related to the middle market. So very interesting that you're kind of seeing and looking at the same things. I'm curious, in 5 to 10 years, what does the players company look like? If you're just sitting here today, and then what does your private equity, real estate, mixed use, sports platform or evolution of that look like kind of in your mind?
It's a great question, but I'm going to coin back a little bit on the current sports landscape because I just kind of thought of this as you were
Yeah.
speaking. It's interesting because right now it's almost like venture capital in sports.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yeah.
just
There's the
betting on
moment.
things that sound cool, maybe. Um,
Mhm.
but to your question, with the Players Company, we've expanded outside of the NFL, of course. We have a lot of athletes across the big five, as well as we open it up to founders, investors, high net worth individuals, and offices to be a part of the platform. We are rolling out a good piece of tech to better be able to serve. As I had mentioned,
Yeah.
think of it like your Glassdoor or Yelp for athletes, and then steadily
Got it.
transitioning into more of a fintech tool so that we can accommodate the founders and the investment side of things as well. But in 5 years, I'm hoping we continue to grow. We have a couple of great partnerships that make us an existing global platform currently,
Mhm.
so we're hoping to grow in different markets and better be able to provide for our demographic base, right?
Got it. Got it.
On the private equity, personal kind of development firm side of things, we're betting heavily on MLS, if I'm transparent with you.
Mhm.
I think out of the major leagues, it's got a very high potential to grow, particularly with the World Cup coming, soccer being
Mhm.
a global sport. There is moderate competition in the States, if you will, between the MLS and the USL, but I
Sure.
think similar, but they have different models, which is
Very different
differential,
models at the
right?
base. Yeah. Different markets too.
Yeah. Um, but I think within 5 to 10 years, that's going to be a powerhouse because you got to think about when it was 30, 40 years ago, right? All the kids were playing football, basketball, baseball, not really soccer. As this new generation grows in the next 10, 20 years, soccer is going to be a huge, huge sport in the US. That's going to
Right.
equate to larger media contracts, which is usually how leagues grow, right? It's those 10-year
Yeah.
contracts. So we're basically hoping to just build out what we're existingly building out, have better footholds in different markets. We're in 6 right now. I'm hoping to get somewhere from, maybe 12 in the next 5 years.
Incredible. I mean, if they're all 12 projects at the scale that you're talking about, that's a lot of dirt moving, um, a lot
Uh,
of work generally.
I was looking this up because I wanted to cite it, right? So we're doing a project on the East Coast right now. It's a public-private partnership. We just submitted the RFP right before Christmas. But essentially, this is I'll just throw numbers out there. It's a $700 million project. It's basically waterfront, and it's a redevelopment of I think about 33 acres.
Okay.
It's going to be a marquee destination. That's kind of our coined term, right?
Got
Uh,
it.
it generates over a how many years? Over a 36-month period of time, it generates 6,388 jobs,
Wow.
1,868 construction jobs, 687 gig jobs, 2,555 indirect jobs, 1,278 induced jobs. So, such as like dining or like,
And that's anchored by sport.
it's anchored by media.
Yeah. Got it.
But that's what I mean. Like a lot of these projects for myself, just kind of growing
Yeah.
up in the Bay Area, right? Through the gentrification of the Bay Area, it's pretty cool
Sure.
to be able to say, "Hey, look, in 10 years, I helped create 10,000 jobs."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on, and I just give you a lot of credit for kind of pairing that entrepreneurial journey, all the way from sports science to TPC to the type of project that you just described. We obviously are big fans of what you're doing. We'll continue to watch what you're doing, perhaps find the opportunities to work and participate on some projects together in the future when those opportunities arise. But I know there may be a number of people that want to reach out to you, both on the athlete side, on the partnership side for TPC. Is the best way right now at the website? Is that the best way to get in touch and start getting involved?
Absolutely, on the website, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Just shoot a message. My name is just Tom at the Players Company. That also works. But I will say my emails are a war zone. Um,
I know how that
Happy to work
feels.
with great people. I'm very looking forward to working with you in the future. I think near term
Yeah,
future, there may be a
yeah.
press release at some point.
We'll
So
see.
I'll
We'll
be excited
see.
to explore that.
I'm really excited to explore that. It's been in the back of my mind since we first touched on it last week. And then I guess out of curiosity and for other family offices or institutional partners, are your deals funded by, specific partnerships that you have? Are you looking for co-invest capital? Should people be reaching out to establish a relationship to see where partnerships may exist?
Yeah, absolutely. So luckily, I've been afforded a good number of capital partners. I
Yep.
mean, in the nature of these projects, you attract some
You
interesting
need a
capital.
lot. Yeah.
But I'm always looking to co-invest. Same thing with myself as well. As I mentioned, Tomco is a
Okay.
holding entity. If it's a
Yep.
interesting project, happy to co whatever in it. But a lot of our existing projects usually have a good anchor capital source, but we're always looking to work with good strategics, especially if it builds a pathway to more projects down the road.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm really looking forward to continuing to build our relationship. We as Momentous, before we went out and launched the platform, were looking for partners who were thematic, maybe to participate as an LP with groups that were thematically investing in teams and real estate, and we couldn't find that happening thematically within the middle market of sports, and ultimately decided to launch Momentous on our own. But in my mind, the asset class of sports is so relationship driven. Competition doesn't even kind of come to the surface for me. It's just where our capital partners, where our exit partners, and where are people that we want to do life and business with. And I think that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, no matter where we are, if we're competing on the pitch or the field or the ice of the court. And so that makes it an exciting place to be, an asset class to be in. And we were asking the question, Marley and I, our CEO, I don't know, last October to one another, going like, is this really an asset class right now? We're walking down the street in New York. So I'm going to ask you the question. I use the term asset class, but do you think this is, does KKR and their acquisition of Arctos and investment, are those the signals to you that show that this is really an asset class and institutional capital, real capital is coming here?
1,000%. I think it's been bubbling. And I think the KKR acquisition of Arctos, as well as the private equity introduction in the college sports, really
Mhm.
tells you the way that professional sports is going. It's going to be one of the, I mean, I would say the coolest asset classes.
Yeah, I agree.
I think everybody's going to always want entertainment value, right? There's always going to be fandom. And as what we see in major networks currently going through a little shift in paradigm, right? With Netflix potentially kind of making all these moves, the starvation for live entertainment is only going to grow, especially if it's a quality, notable aspect.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's going to be some really interesting moves in 2026.
Well, listen, here's what we'll do. We'll get back on the line in January of 27 and we'll recap how things have unfolded in 26. I think you're spot on. As a professional and especially if you love sports, it's an incredible place to be. I think there is a lot of runway ahead of us and a lot of cool things that are going to happen. And people are, these days, what's the hedge against AI and the growth of that? And I don't think there's anything that's going to replace live entertainment, in-person experiences. I'm a believer that AI will just enhance that overall experience and that product more than anything else. So looking forward to keeping the conversation going with you, connecting here, hopefully in the next few months, and really appreciate your candidness and willing to share what you're working on and how you got here. I think the audience is really going to enjoy it.
Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
We'll definitely keep the conversation alive.
What a fantastic episode there with Dr. Tom Zheng. Thank you again for tuning in. For everyone listening, if this episode gave you a new perspective on athletes as investors, the future of sports and real estate, if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it. Please smash that like button, that subscribe button, either here on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you don't mind following us across all channels, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, especially. You can stay up to date on the work that we're doing and the content that we're putting out. And if you don't mind sharing this episode with somebody who you think would enjoy it, we would really, really appreciate it. And again, we're really building a community around access, alignment, long-term impact, and everything happening within sports as an asset class. And we really are glad that you're a part of it. I'm Kyle Israel. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again next time. In next week's podcast, we'll have our CEO, Marley Hughes, joining us with his guest, Kurt Frost, which I am positive will be entertaining, insightful, and something you'll definitely want to tune into. Until next time, take care.